Morning to you, 7:07. So the good news on yesterday's virus spike is they remain all travellers, of course, all trackable. The Ministry of Health Director General Ashley Bloomfield back with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
If you look at all the graphs internationally, this is only going one way for us, isn't it? How badly do you think it will get?
Well, all the actions we're taking is to try and stop it going badly. And we've had a chance to look at what's happening in other countries. Most recently, a paper published in the UK, which has been informing the UK response. Different, though, is that we've had the border restrictions in, of course, from quite an early point. So that's given us a head start here. So what we're really trying to do is, even instead of flattening this curve, going from an Aoraki Mount Cook down to a Ngātahoe, we're trying to go down to a set of rolling hills. And that's the reason that we've introduced, some wider testing. You've talked about testing. That's the reason the mass gathering restriction has gone in place, and I think we'll see other things coming into place as well.
We have not been testing enough, have we?
We have been testing appropriately and in accordance with the WHO advice. That is, symptomatic people and also any close controls if they develop symptoms. What we have seen over the last 2 or 3 days is a big increase in testing. All those positive tests to date have been people who have returned from overseas. So what we're now looking for with the 500 or 600 or more tests being done each day is we're looking for cases which don't have that overseas link. That would give us an early indication we might have community transmission, and then we can go hard.
You honestly believe we don't have community transmission right now?
It's really hard to know, Mike. But
honestly?
Look, it's really hard to know. It could be out there, and one of the reasons that we are testing all those 150 close contacts down in Dunedin is just to help reassure us and the people of Dunedin that there's not community transmission. So this is what we're looking for, and this is why we have now that case definition allowing people to be tested who may not have the overseas travel link, but where there's a high suspicion.
Are you honestly telling me, I cannot tell you how many people have contacted me to say, I know people have got symptoms, I've got symptoms, or I came back from overseas, and they're being denied tests?
So it's still a judgment, and of course not everyone needs a test. There's still a very clear set of symptoms associated with COVID-19, and we need to test the right people. Now, just for example, doing 300 tests or so in Auckland means 4 batches through. The laboratory staff are working through into the night. What we want to do is make sure we're testing the right people and finding those positive cases.
See, reportage this morning from the Invercargill case. The Invercargill case was known of in Invercargill this whole week. We only find out about it yesterday. How does that work?
Well, if someone had symptoms and had a history of overseas travel, the advice has been really clear that people should be seeking healthline advice, seeing a GP and getting tested. And that did happen. It's a positive case. And now we can isolate the person and any close contact.
Your view on schools, it seems absurd that schools are still open given all we're seeing in the world at the moment.
Well, you've seen countries move to school closures much further down the track, and countries that have been successful, particularly like Singapore and Taiwan, have not closed schools.
Can I just ask you this from a medical point of view? The government seems to be running this line, look at Singapore, look at South Korea. Fair enough, they're good numbers and they seem to be a success story. They did a lot more than us a lot earlier. They thermal, there's thermal temperature checking. There's a great deal more going on in the early part than we ever did. And therefore you might be citing a case that's not actually that applicable to us.
Well, what we have been looking at is what they did and how that applies to New Zealand. In fact, New Zealand had tougher border restrictions than Singapore from an earlier date. So just back to schools, schools would be closed if there was an indication of any sign of transmission there. That is something you would do. But don't forget that if you close all schools, you also disrupt your whole workforce, including your health workforce. And that's all these things have to be considered.
And I think that's where the argument lies at the moment, isn't it? So you're disrupting the workforce. What's more disruptive, a workforce that doesn't exist anymore because the businesses have gone broke because you let the numbers get too high, or short-term pain now to fix an issue?
Yeah, these are the judgments you have to make and look at exactly what's happening and learn from overseas. So that's why we've got our minds turned directly to that.
Are you 100% confident, once again, a lot of stories coming in from the airport, people wandering into the country still with seemingly not the information that the government is telling us is out there, with seemingly no testing, hopping in cars and taxis and just wandering off to God knows where?
Well, what I can say is that there is a process, even before people get to customs, where they have to have filled out a health declaration, and it has to be sighters, the person has to be spoken to and it has to be ticked or stamped before they'll even get through customs and immigration. And for example, a couple of days ago, there were 38 people who were identified and assessed, had a health assessment by a nurse out there at the airport. So I think the process is picking people up.
Are you on top of this?
Yes, I think we are on top of it, and I think New Zealand's response so far has been good. We've gone hard and we've gone early and will continue to do so.